Hello and welcome to the Black Cat Bushcraft channel. Today I wanted to set up a plow point shelter utilizing a bipod that I improvised off the landscape. The reason you might want to use this is it allows you to set up a plow point shelter where you might not have the perfect placement of trees, or in a clearing where you have no trees. This could be done in an open field or again in a clearing in the woods. And it gives you a nice sturdy structure in which to base your plow point so that you have that much better and more sturdy of a shelter. It's a very simple process. Stick with me and let's get started right now. And to get started, I've cut two poles that are roughly 48 inches in length and approximately 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter. These poles are definitely longer than what I'd have to have for this type of a shelter setup. However, it's summertime in my area. It's approximately 97 degrees where I'm filming right now. So having a shelter that's higher up and more open in the front will be nice to allow more airflow in this type of a climate. However, if it were cold weather, then I would choose shorter poles to get my shelter closer to the ground and hopefully hold more body heat in that shelter. All right, you can see I've got my two poles laid side by side here. To start out, attaching these two together, I'm going to make a timber hitch. Basically, a timber hitch is like tying an overhand knot. So that's an overhand knot, but rather than cinching it tight, I come back to the back side of that knot, and now I'm simply going to wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wraps. So again, just like an overhand knot. You can see I've got the little loop here. I just wrap it around 5 times and cinch it down. And now the harder I pull, the tighter that's going to cinch these two poles together. At that point, I'm going to do a series of wrap and frap. And I'm going to do 3 wraps and 3 fraps. A lot of times in the past, I've always heard to do 6 and 3, but 3 and 3 work fine, so there's no need to go through the extra trouble. So I simply neatly wrap this around 1, 2, and a third time, and bring it back around. Okay, so that's my 3 wraps. Now I'm going to come back through the center to create my fraps, and that's going to help pull the wrapping all tight. Come back through the center and pull this down tight. Try to keep everything nice and tight together. Not that it has to be, but just in the sake of being neat. Right now, that's 1. I'm going to use a wrapping stick, just a toggle, to stick here on the ground. And that'll help me from tearing up my hands, pulling on this bank line, as it has an ability to cut through your skin a little bit. And you do this a lot. It's the second wrap. And this will make my 3rd wrap. Once again, use my toggle stick. Cinch it down nice and tight. Now, to finish off this bipod, I'm going to use a clove hitch. So a clove hitch is a very simple way to finish off a wrap and frap set. You simply make an X, as you see right here. You can see that X. Right? And at that point, I'm just simply going to come back through the center of the X. And you just run that through underneath the bottom of the X. And that will fight down nice and tight and hold my wrap and frap, my lashing all together. And then if I'm really concerned about it, what I can do is come back and tie a stopper knot right here. And once that knot bites down on the clove hitch, you really are not going to have to worry about it ever coming out. All right, now I have the bipod lashed together nice and sturdy. We can start on the tarp setup. All right, so the tarp I'm going to be using for this setup is a 5x7 tarp from Campcraft Outdoors. And this one is made of Nomex. I don't believe this one is made anymore, but it's one that I've enjoyed having and keeping in my pack as an emergency shelter. Anytime I plan to set up a shelter, whether it be a tarp and hammock type setup or something like what I'm doing today, I always bring along my shelter kit. And basically what this is some items just to make setting up a shelter easier. Obviously, when you're setting up shelter, you can always craft stakes and things like that and toggles off the landscape, but it's nice if you already have ready-made stakes that you carry with you, and that just makes the process a little more easy. So I normally carry 6 of these little ABS stakes with bright colored paracord so I can see my stakes when I go to collect them back up. Also carry a set of guy lines. These are reflective guy lines, so that way when I'm wandering around camp at night with my headlight on, I tend to see these a little bit better. I also carry a ridge line. This is a 35-foot ridge line, and it's also already set up with 2 bank line Prusik knots. I also carry several pre-made toggles like this. So again, when I want to set up a shelter quick, I'm not fiddling around looking for sticks. These are just already there and ready. So all of these things being carried in my pack makes setting up a shelter much faster and much easier when it's important to get it done quickly. The first step in this process is to come to the back corner of my tarp here and just stake it out. Just like that. Now I can pull the tarp tight against the bipod. A really fast way to attach your guy lines to your tarp is to have a stationary loop at the end of each guy line. In this case, I just tied an overhand knot to create that stationary loop, but it could easily be a bowline knot. Basically, all I do is take my guy line through the bottom of my tarp tie out, simply insert a toggle right there, and pull it tight so that it binds against the tarp tie out. The nice thing is this is quick to attach, and it's also quick to recover, making takedown or setup of your shelter that much easier. All right, so I've got everything laid into place to show you how this shelter comes together. Simply going to lift up my bipod. I'm going to grab this guy line here. I went ahead and staked it just to save some time. I'm going to run that through my tarp tie out. And I'm going to toggle it off like I showed you. I'm using a toggle in this case that's long enough to bind up against my bipod without popping out. My pre-carved ones were a little small for this particular purpose. All right, I'm just going to pull the bipod out so it's tight against that stake. And I can adjust it using this taut line hitch here. Once I get everything staked out. Now it's just a simple matter of staking out the sides. All right, come over to this other side here, stake it out, and it'll be done deal. And obviously you can make subtle adjustments to tighten everything up with your guy line, adjust your stakes and so forth, but that's basically it. It's a very simple shelter setup. Just in case you're not familiar with how to tie a taut line hitch so that you can use that for your guy line, I'll show you here on the spot. I do have a video on this if you want to see it in more detail. Basically, you simply wrap the line around itself once and come inside of that loop 2 times. Now you cross over top, and here on the outside you simply loop it back in. And this is what that knot looks like here. All right, just to give you guys a closer look of how it all comes together. We've got our bipod that we lashed. And with that toggle and guy line, I'm able to pull tension on the tarp to get a nice crisp ridge across the top, staked out on the 3 back corners, or 2 sides and 1 back. And that's it. This can be done with an emergency space blanket. It could be done with a bigger tarp, such as an 8x8, like an oilskin type tarp. And you can always adjust the angle of this by making a longer bipod or shorter to bring the shelter down lower. Of course, you can adjust these inward and outward too, depending on how much adjustment you want to make. So it's a nice flexible shelter, and it's fairly easy to set up. All right, so again, the flexibility of this type of shelter is it allows you to set up this plow point configuration tarp shelter even in an area where you don't have perfect tree placement or even in an open field, as long as you had access to 2 poles to make your bipod, you can set this up with no problem. If you wanted to add some more stability to the shelter, you could always come back and put in a ridge pole here down the middle, and that way your tarp will pull tight across that ridge pole. And that would be very beneficial if you were using something like an oilskin tarp, like an 8x8, something that's a little bit larger and heavier, or especially if you're using like a waxed canvas type tarp, that ridge pole would definitely be a benefit for you. But in a case where you're using like a 5x7 emergency space blanket or something like this 5x7 more emergency type tarp, this works well. You can use those stakes and that guy line to pull it out plenty tight so that it'll shed water. So again, very versatile design and just one more tool that you can add to your toolbox. I appreciate you guys' interest. I appreciate your time for tuning in, and I look forward to talking to you with another video again as soon as possible. And until that one, take care and God bless.